Have you ever felt like someone was watching over you, even after they were gone? Not just a comforting presence, but something more urgent, more insistent? Like a hand on your shoulder, trying to steer you away from a cliff you can't yet see. I've learned that the veil between worlds is thinner than we think, especially when love and secrets are involved. The night after my grandmother's funeral, a night already thick with grief and the scent of wilting lilies, I had a dream so vivid it felt like a memory resurfacing. She stood at the foot of my bed, not as the frail woman she'd become, but as I remembered her from my childhood, vibrant, strong, dressed in her favorite lavender church dress, the one with the tiny pearl buttons. But her eyes, usually sparkling with warmth, were wide, filled with a chilling, desperate fear I'd never seen in them before. She leaned in, her familiar scent of sandalwood and roses suddenly sharp, almost metallic with anxiety, and whispered, her voice raspy, urgent, "He knows your secret." I woke up with a gasp, my heart hammering against my ribs, the sheets tangled around my legs. Trembling, a cold sweat slicked my skin despite the warmth of my room. What secret? My mind reeled. I was an open book, or so I thought. My life was simple, uncomplicated. And who was he? The ambiguity of the warning was almost worse than a direct accusation. That one spectral moment, that chilling whisper in the dark, didn't just disturb my sleep, it shattered the carefully constructed reality of my family, dragging me, unprepared and unwilling, into a dark truth I never asked for. What happened next? It's a story that still sends shivers down my spine, a constant echo in the quiet moments, a haunting reminder that the past is never truly buried. My name is Aisha, and for the first 20-something years of my life, I genuinely believed my family was beautifully, reassuringly normal, perhaps even a little boring, in the best possible way. We were a tapestry woven with familiar threads, Sunday lunches at my parents' house, the aroma of my mother's chicken korma mingling with the boisterous laughter of my cousins. Birthday parties were always a delightful chaos of off-key singing and too much cake. And the phone calls, especially with my grandmother, Layla, my Dottie, were a cherished ritual. They'd meander through daily updates, gentle advice, and always ended with her soft, "Tell Dottie I love her," a phrase that wrapped around me like her warmest shawl. My grandmother, Layla, was more than just the matriarch. She was the quiet, steady heartbeat of our family, the glue that held all the disparate pieces of our lives together. Soft-spoken, with a smile that could melt glaciers, she possessed a profound, unshakable spirituality that radiated from her like a gentle warmth. It wasn't preachy or ostentatious, it was just Dottie. She taught me how to pray, not through rote memorization, but by sharing the quiet solace she found in her faith. Her hands, gnarled with age but deft and knowing, showed me the secrets to her legendary biryani, the precise blend of spices, the patience required for the rice to fluff just so. More than that, she taught me the subtle art of being strong without ever raising your voice, of commanding respect through quiet dignity and unwavering kindness. When she passed away after a brief illness, it felt like the sky had cracked open, like my whole world had tilted precariously on its axis. The rituals of mourning, the condolences, the shared tears, they were a blur. I moved through those days in a fog of grief, the absence of her presence a raw, aching void. But even in that profound sorrow, nothing could have prepared me for what came next, for the way her departure would unravel everything I thought I knew. That night, in my dream, the Dottie I saw wasn't the peaceful soul we'd laid to rest. The serene acceptance I'd clung to in her final days was gone, replaced by a palpable worry, an almost frantic urgency that contorted her beloved features. Her message, those 4 chilling words, "He knows your secret," didn't just echo in the dreamscape. They landed like a physical blow, shaking something loose deep inside me, a seed of unease that began to sprout in the fertile ground of my grief. A secret? My secret? It felt impossible. The very next morning, the harsh ring of my phone sliced through the fragile quiet of my apartment. I was still shrouded in the remnants of that unsettling dream, the image of Dottie's fearful face seared into my mind. I glanced at the caller ID, an unfamiliar number, but the area code was from my hometown. Hesitantly, I answered. The voice on the other end was hesitant, tinged with an anxiety that mirrored my own. It was my uncle, Farhan, my father's younger brother. We hadn't spoken in years, not since a forgotten family argument had created a chasm between him and my parents, a silence Dottie had always lamented but couldn't quite mend. His call, at this moment, felt like another ripple from the stone Dottie's dream had cast into my life. Aisha, he began, his voice lower than I remembered, strained. It's Farhan. I'm so sorry about Amy. There was a pause, thick with unspoken things. Listen, he continued, the nervousness more pronounced now, I found something. Something your grandmother left behind. I think you need to see it. His words, vague yet laden with significance, tightened the knot of unease in my stomach. Something Dottie left? Why would Farhan have it? Why was he calling me? We arranged to meet that afternoon at a small, neutral coffee shop halfway between our homes. The air was heavy with unspoken questions as I drove, my mind racing, trying to connect invisible dots. What could Dottie have left that Farhan, the estranged uncle, would deliver? He was already there when I arrived, looking older than I remembered, lines of worry etched around his eyes. He nursed a half-empty cup of coffee, his gaze darting around as if expecting someone. After a few awkward pleasantries, the kind reserved for relatives you barely know, he reached into his worn briefcase. He pulled out a letter, not a modern envelope, but an old-fashioned aerogram, folded and refolded so many times the creases were soft and yielding. It was yellowed with age, the blue ink faded but still legible. My name, Aisha, was written on the front in Dottie's distinctive, delicate, slightly slanted handwriting. My breath caught in my throat. It felt like holding a piece of her, a tangible link to the woman I was mourning so deeply. I just sat there for a long moment, the cacophony of the coffee shop fading into a dull hum. My fingers trembled as I traced her name. Uncle Farhan watched me, his expression a mixture of pity and apprehension. Finally, with a deep breath that did little to steady my racing heart, I unfolded the letter. I began to read words she had penned years ago, words clearly never meant to be found while she was alive, words that would soon detonate the foundations of my world. The letter didn't begin with her usual affectionate greetings. There was no "my dearest Aisha." Instead, it launched directly into the heart of a storm I hadn't known was raging. "My darling Aisha," it started, her familiar script a stark contrast to the unfamiliar gravity of her words. "If you are reading this, it means I am gone, and I couldn't protect you the way I wanted to. But you are strong, my child, and you must know the truth, however painful." Protect me? From what? The unease I'd felt since the dream intensified, coiling like a serpent in my gut. She then spoke about my father, her beloved son. Not the gentle, quiet man I knew, the one who read bedtime stories and helped with my math homework. She wrote about a time before I was born, a darker chapter in his life, hinting at a shadow self I couldn't reconcile with my memories. He had been part of something, she wrote vaguely, something that had caused a deep schism, something that tore our family apart in ways I was only now beginning to comprehend. Then, the letter took a more specific, horrifying turn. "Do you remember us ever speaking of the old farmhouse, the one that burned down before you were born? In 1985? I had a dim, almost forgotten memory of hushed adult conversations, a tragic accident, something best left undisturbed. The official story, Dottie wrote, the one everyone accepted, was that it was an accident, faulty wiring, a stray spark. But it wasn't an accident, Aisha." My blood ran cold. I could feel the color draining from my face. "A man had died in that fire," she continued. "Someone I'd never heard of before, his name completely absent from any family stories, any photo albums, any casual reminiscences. His name was Saif. And according to Dottie's trembling script, Saif was my father's half-brother. My uncle. An uncle I never knew existed." I looked up from the letter, my vision blurring. Uncle Farhan was watching me, his face etched with a grim understanding. My father had a brother? Who died? And it wasn't an accident? The questions ricocheted through my mind, each one more disorienting than the last. Why had no one ever told me about him? Why was his entire existence, his very name, erased from our family history as if he'd never been born? The letter in my hand felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds, each word a stone dragging me down into a murky, hidden past. What had happened in that fire? And what did my father have to do with it? Dottie's dream, her warning, "He knows your secret," suddenly took on a terrifying new dimension. Was this the secret? And who was he? The man who knew? That night, sleep was an impossibility. Dottie's letter lay on my nightstand, its presence a palpable weight in the room. Every time I closed my eyes, the words swam before me: safe. Fire. Not an accident. Your father's half-brother. The questions churned, relentless and unanswerable. I replayed my Dottie's dream, her fearful eyes, her desperate whisper. The pieces were starting to form a horrifying picture, but the edges were still shrouded in mist. As I lay there, tossing and turning, a faint, familiar scent began to permeate the air. Lavender. Dottie's signature scent. She always had lavender sachets in her drawers, a lavender-scented soap by her sink. It was so distinct, so undeniably her. I sat bolt upright, my heart pounding. Was I imagining it? Grief playing tricks on my senses? But the fragrance was so strong, so real, as if she were standing right there in the room with me. And then, my bedroom lamp, a sturdy, reliable fixture, flickered. Once, twice, then went out, plunging the room into near darkness, save for the sliver of moonlight filtering through the curtains. My breath hitched. A cold chill, entirely unrelated to the room temperature, swept over me, raising goosebumps on my arms. My rational mind scrambled for explanations, a power surge, an old bulb. But deep down, a primal instinct knew better. Then I heard it. 3 distinct knocks, soft, almost hesitant, but unmistakable, on my bedroom wall. Knock. 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 My room was on the 2nd floor, there was no one outside. My neighbors were quiet. Was I losing my mind? Was the stress and grief manifesting in these strange occurrences? Or was Dottie still trying to reach me, to guide me, to warn me further? Over the next few days, the strange phenomena continued, subtle yet deeply unsettling. A framed photograph of Dottie and me, one taken at my university graduation, inexplicably fell off my bookshelf, the glass shattering. Old family albums I hadn't touched in ages would be slightly ajar on the shelf. One afternoon, my phone, sitting untouched on the kitchen counter, suddenly played a series of short voice notes from Dottie, snippets of old conversations, her laughter, her advice about some trivial matter. These were recordings I hadn't listened to in years, buried deep in my chat history. Hearing her voice so unexpectedly felt like a jolt, both comforting and profoundly eerie. And always, woven through these inexplicable events, that whisper from my dream would return in my waking thoughts, or in fleeting moments just before sleep claimed me, "Be careful who you trust." It was a constant, unsettling refrain, making me question everyone and everything. Was Uncle Farhan telling me the whole truth? What about my own parents? The foundations of my world were not just cracked, they were crumbling. I couldn't take the suffocating weight of the unknown anymore. The letter, the dream, the strange occurrences, Dottie's persistent, whispered warning, it was all leading somewhere, and I knew, with a chilling certainty, that I had to follow. The thought of confronting my father was terrifying. He had always been my rock, a quiet, steady presence. How could I ask him about something so monstrous? How could I look him in the eye and voice the accusations Dottie's letter had laid bare? But Dottie's urgent fear in my dream, her insistence, spurred me on. I chose a quiet evening, after dinner. My mother was out with a friend. The house felt unnaturally still. I found my father in his study, reading, the lamplight casting long shadows across his face. My heart was racing so fast I could hear the blood pounding in my ears. I sat down opposite him, Dottie's letter clutched in my sweaty palm like a talisman. "Baba," I began, my voice barely a tremor. "I need to ask you something. Something about Dottie, and about the past." He looked up, his expression mild, curious. But as I continued, as I spoke the name safe, as I mentioned the farmhouse fire, his face transformed. The color drained from his cheeks, leaving him ashen. His eyes, usually so kind, flickered with something I'd never seen before: fear, yes, but something else too, something akin to being cornered. He whispered, his voice hoarse, barely audible, Who told you this? My hand shook as I held out Dottie's letter. Dottie did, I said, my voice gaining a sliver of strength from her words. She left this for me. He took the letter, his strong hands, the hands that had taught me to ride a bike, now trembling so violently he could barely hold the fragile paper. He read it, his shoulders slumping, the weight of years, of secrets, seeming to crush him. He didn't deny it. There were no protestations of innocence, no angry rebuttals. Just a heavy, suffocating silence. Then, he began to speak, the words tumbling out, fragmented, laced with pain. Safe, he confirmed, was his half-brother, the son from my grandfather's first marriage. A marriage kept hidden from the world, a relic of a past everyone had tried to bury. My grandfather, it turned out, had lived a life with more compartments than anyone knew. When my father, as a young man, discovered Safe's existence and, more crucially, learned that Safe might have a claim to a significant portion of the ancestral family land, a bitter rivalry ignited. It was a tale as old as time, jealousy, resentment, the poison of contested inheritance. The fire, he wouldn't, or couldn't, give me the details. His eyes darted away, unable to meet mine. He just kept muttering that things got out of hand, that it was a terrible, terrible mistake. He spoke of arguments, of anger, of a confrontation at the farmhouse that escalated beyond anyone's control. Was it jealousy that fueled the flames? Uncontrolled rage? A tragic, unforgivable mistake? He wouldn't say. The ambiguity was almost worse than a direct confession of malice. He looked at me then, tears welling in his eyes, his face a mask of anguish and regret. I never wanted you to find out, Aisha, he choked out. I wanted to protect you from this ugliness. But his protection had become a prison of lies, for him and for me. In the days and weeks that followed that devastating conversation, my mind was a whirlwind. My father's confession, though incomplete, had irrevocably altered my perception of him, of my family, of my entire upbringing. I kept thinking, how many families, behind their curated facades of normalcy, carry secrets as dark and heavy as this? How many lives are built on foundations of carefully constructed lies, all dressed up and presented as protection? I began to see Dottie's actions in a new light. Her dream visitation, the letter, the subtle, ghostly nudges, it wasn't just about protecting me from some nebulous, external danger. It was far more profound than that. She was trying to protect me from becoming like them, like the ones who chose silence over truth, who buried their guilt and allowed it to fester, poisoning the generations that followed. She knew the corrosive power of such secrets, how they can seep into the very soul of a family, warping relationships and perpetuating cycles of pain. Her spirit wasn't haunting me in a malevolent sense. She was guiding me. Pushing me, with a love that transcended death itself, to confront the darkness, to drag the truth into the light, however painful that process might be. She was urging me to be the one to break the cycle of silence and deception. Have you ever felt that? That persistent, unshakable feeling that someone beyond this world, someone you loved and lost, is trying to push you towards something difficult, something you might instinctively shy away from, but ultimately, something bigger than yourself, something that leads to a more authentic path? It's been several months now since the foundations of my world were shaken to their core. The initial shock has subsided, replaced by a complex landscape of emotions. I've started journaling, meticulously recording every dream I have of Dottie, every fleeting image, every whispered word, every unexplained occurrence I perceive as a sign from her. It's my way of continuing the conversation, of trying to understand the messages she's still sending. Every Friday, I visit her grave, taking a small bouquet of lavender. It's a quiet ritual. Sometimes, in the stillness of my apartment, I light a lavender-scented candle, the one that smells just like her. I sit there in the flickering light, and I just listen. Listen for the echo of her wisdom, for the comfort of her presence, for guidance on how to navigate this new, complicated reality. My relationship with my father is strained. It's a delicate, painful dance of unspoken accusations and profound disappointment. The love is still there, of course, buried under layers of hurt and betrayal. But it's changed irrevocably. I don't carry hate in my heart for him. Dottie wouldn't have wanted that. Instead, I carry the truth. And I've learned that the truth, in all its unvarnished complexity, is sometimes a far heavier burden than any lie. But alongside the weight, there's also a strange sense of liberation. The truth, once uncovered, has its own power. It's a stark, uncomfortable clarity, but it's real. And living in reality, however painful, is ultimately more freeing than living in a comfortable illusion. So I'll ask you again, the question that now echoes in my own life: what secrets might be buried in your family's past, concealed beneath layers of polite smiles and carefully edited histories? What truths are you, perhaps unknowingly, afraid to uncover? My Dottie's last warning, the one delivered in a dream shrouded in fear, wasn't a curse meant to torment me. It was a gift. A painful, challenging gift, but a gift nonetheless. It was a call to courage, an invitation to listen to the whispers of the past, to see beyond the surface, and to seek what is real, even when it's heartbreaking. Because sometimes, the strongest spirits, the ones who linger, are those who loved us the most fiercely, whose love is so powerful it refuses to be extinguished by death. They reach out, not to frighten, but to guide, to protect in ways they couldn't in life. And sometimes, the truth doesn't set you free right away. Sometimes, it shatters you first. But in the breaking, there's an opportunity to rebuild, to heal, to ensure that the shadows of the past don't darken the future. Ultimately, the truth, however difficult, saves you. If you've ever experienced something unexplainable, a moment that made you question everything you thought you knew, a whisper from beyond, I encourage you to share it in the comments below. You never know whose life you might touch, who you might help, by telling your story. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more stories that explore the seen and unseen, and share this with someone who still believes the dead can't speak. Because sometimes, they do. And sometimes, we desperately need to listen.